Can you remember what you were told about the machine the first time?
Well, I think you explained pretty clearly, especially with your cube diagrams of the 1N cube and the 4 and 12.
Of the hypercube.
The hypercube, really, yes. And just the notion of how parallel processing was, different from the serial, the traditional approach. And I think that in itself was kind of interesting. It seemed like, oh boy, here's something fresh. We had worked on a number of computer projects, notably for IBM, for a long time, and it seemed all we were doing was just sort of messing with covers and controls. Here was a chance to really sort of get into something both different and to understand the principle behind it. And meeting Danny, that also was interesting, both there and later when you moved to Cambridge. I remember he showed us some of his pet projects. One of them was, it looked like hip boots with a inner tube at the top. Yeah, he could go
I remember now.
Fishing around, floating in it, which was, it was amusing, but it was actually a pretty good idea too.
Yeah.
So, I was hoping to find out more from Gordon what activities we did. We had photos of some small models, and I don't know whether that was something that we did prematurely that really was almost not relevant.
No, what I remember is that we had our first meeting and talked about the design. I guess I can't remember actually talking about the hypercube and showing you all the diagrams, but I guess if you do, then I believe that I had already had those diagrams, and that was the structuring idea of the computer from the hardware standpoint, and also how people accessed the different processors. But what I recall is that we Danny and I talked to you about the machine and what it was going to do, how it was different, and described this sort of cube of cube hypercube idea. And you and Gordon then immediately said, okay, well, the cube or the cube of cube seems to define the machine, so you were going to go off and do sketches on that. And I had been working on the machine from the beginning, and had visualized this hypercube network, and had been working with that for so long that I was worried that it was too sort of pat or too simple to just run off with the cube or the cube of cubes. So I said, okay, I with my friend Tom Czutrowski, who has an architecture background, we were going to look at other forms and other possibilities just to make sure that we didn't overlook something. And then, when he and I sat down to do that, at some point I said, okay, well, I'm going to just sketch up the cube of cubes anyway. And, when I did that, we both looked at it and said, oh, well, okay, I guess it's going to be a cube of cubes after all.
Sure.
And then we got back together again, and I had all sorts of, Tom and I had all sorts of weird and different forms, and you guys had all the drawings that I think you've also probably given copies of to MoMA of showing different variations on cubical forms or on cubes.
There was some exploration in that. When you look at that whole set of small-scale models that we had made, some of them didn't relate to cubes very much at all, but other ones in that same set did. So that makes me think that you had already broached the cube idea with us at some point. And I think one of the models, and I don't have a picture of them with me, came pretty close to what we ended up with.
Right.
So I think you've probably done a very good job of communicating the idea of the hypercube and how that related to what the cover form of the covers might be.
Right.